Hello, welcome back to Meet the Solutionaries, your program on Green TV, where I, Betsy Rosenberg, interview the most interesting and important leaders across the green spectrum. And one of those is a politician, a good politician, who I have had the pleasure of interviewing. He reminded me twice before, my former show, Eco Talk. And I'm talking about State Senator Rob Hogg of Iowa. And he has been a leader, absolutely, for at least a decade on the climate issue when it was not popular, before it was cool or hot, so hot to talk about it. Wrote a book called America's Climate Century, all about what Americans can do about what's to come, and it is coming to pass. So welcome to my new platform, greentv.com.
Betsy, it's great to be with you, and climate issue is more urgent now than it's ever been before, and I'm delighted to have this opportunity to speak with you.
And the opportunity comes because this is the decade anniversary, if you will, of Superstorm Sandy. Forgot that it wasn't technically a hurricane because it was certainly a hurricane, but somehow, just disaster ensued, and many people lost their lives. 44 deaths, I think, is what I just saw, and $60 billion in damages, which would be $81.9 million in today's economy. So devastating. But 10 years later, there are still many people, especially in places where they don't have all the resources, are still struggling. Some still don't have homes to go back to. And it's really a tale of two cities and two different income ranges, and been reading about that. And it's just one more example of those who contribute the least in terms of greenhouse gas emissions get hit first and worst. So welcome to talk about all that. And then we're going to end for sure with what our viewers can do to help stem the tide of extinction, humanity, if we really want to get honest. But we're gonna look back. So 10 years ago, I remember October 29th is my husband's birthday. We were out to dinner, and I kept looking down at my phone because I was horrified. When Katrina hit, I was doing my program on Air America, and I said on the air, "So help me God, this is climate change arrived on our shores." And then they canceled my show the next day. But every hurricane that I call hurricane because it's weather on steroids, I've just said, this is it. This is it. I'm certainly not the only one to say that, to see that. But since then, my goodness, things have really ramped up, not in a good way.
Yeah, it has really been bad since Hurricane Sandy. It has ushered in a decade of devastation in this country. I just was looking up the numbers, and with Hurricane Ian, we have now suffered in the United States over $1 trillion of disaster damage since Hurricane Sandy, just from the large disasters that the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration tracks on its website. Look, and it's not just the money. There are a lot of lives lost. The 44 number you referred to is just New York. Overall, Hurricane Sandy killed nearly 100 Americans.
Wow.
But it's not even just that. It's the heartache and the trauma that go with it. And Betsy, you may recall, we had massive flooding here in Cedar Rapids in 2008, which is why Hurricane Sandy meant so much to me, because I knew what they were experiencing. It's that heartache and trauma. And, in Iowa, we had another catastrophic 500-year flood, not in Cedar Rapids, but elsewhere in the state in 2019. But then in 2020, we had an unprecedented land hurricane called a derecho that in Cedar Rapids destroyed 70% of our tree canopy. And for my house, we had a tree on and in my house, and it took 16 months for us to rebuild. That was August 10th, 2020. And, I'm still recovering from that. Fortunately, it took us 16 months, but we got the house repaired. These disasters happen and they just don't disappear. People live with them the rest of their lives. And this 10th anniversary is a moment for Americans to remember the victims and the survivors of not just Hurricane Sandy, but all climate disasters, and to commit to taking the action we need to take so it doesn't happen, so it doesn't get so much worse, right? I mean, it's bad as it is, and it's going to get worse unless we take action. We need to take that action.
Absolutely. I mean, Hurricane Ian, I've watched, like we all have, the devastation. And then The news crews are usually there a couple of days. This time they stayed for the most part for a week, which is more than usual, but the damage was more devastating than usual. My husband and I were on Sanibel Island in March. It was gorgeous, and those shells on the beach, and it's no more. And Fort Myers, and you know what they're facing. I don't know if they know what they're facing. Maybe that's a blessing in a way, but and the news crews leave, and these people's lives are just completely destroyed. And seeing boats on top of houses and cars on top of boats, and some of these people, their boat was their livelihood, or they lived on their boat. And insurance, of course, is getting harder and harder to obtain. It's a nightmare, but it's out of sight, out of mind too often, isn't it? Until the next one hits. But the point is, everybody, it's coming for everybody. You never know where it's going to come.
And you are so right when you say that poor and marginalized communities are most at risk. But I also like to remind people in my district in Iowa, nobody is so rich that they are immune from the effects of climate change. This is something that should unite us. We should all be taking the action we urgently need, because it is really a matter of survival for our country, survival for our natural world, and survival for future generations. We need to act. You just look through what has happened. I've got a list I made of just some of the big ones.
Yeah.
You have Hurricane Ian, you had Hurricane Fiona, last year Hurricane Ida, before that Hurricane Laura, Hurricane Harvey, Irma, and Maria, Hurricane Matthew, Michael, Florence. These were all tens of billions of dollars. And that's just the hurricanes. What about the Western wildfires? What about the derecho that we experienced here in Iowa? What about the flooding this year alone? Kentucky, St. Louis, Dallas, Las Vegas, even Death Valley, right? That we've had this catastrophic, unprecedented flooding. And it's time for Americans to see what's happening. We can't avert our eyes any longer. We've got to deal with this reality. And here's the good news, and you know this, Betsy. We have solutions that work if we just would do them. And the Inflation Reduction Act was a major step forward. But we need to do so much more than that if we're truly going to deal with this problem.
A Green New Deal would have been a good start. That was, very ambitious. And of course, that's mocked by Republicans, who, by the way, did not vote, none of them, for the climate bill or Inflation Reduction Act. We can talk about that in a minute. But you reminded me that you were on my program twice before. Once was on the first anniversary of Superstorm Sandy, and then something after Mitt Romney. Well, you remind our audience, because it gets my blood pressure up just thinking about it.
Yeah, well, in 2012, while a hurricane was hitting Florida and then Louisiana, people don't remember the Republican National Convention was delayed a day because of a hurricane.
You can't make this up. You cannot make this up.
You can't make this up. And we're having record rainfall from that same hurricane in Louisiana. And Mitt Romney mocked President Obama for being worried about sea level rise. And it's like, good Lord, no, we've got to act. Look,
I'm laughing because I can remember where I was sitting in our house when he said that, like just like when I was driving and Trump pulled us out of the Paris Agreement. I had to pull over and cry, literally, knowing what that meant.
Those things are shocking. Here's the thing I think Republicans need. They need to remember that Ronald Reagan signed the Montreal Protocol to deal with stratospheric ozone depletion. They need to remember people in their history like Richard Nixon, who created the EPA, and Teddy Roosevelt, of course, who all Americans should appreciate for what he did for natural land preservation and national parks in this country. They have a heritage that they can build on if they want to build on it. The problem is, I think they're so dependent on the fossil fuel money. And I'll give you an example of that. We don't have any fossil fuel production in Iowa. We don't have really any automobile manufacturing, although we do have some manufacturers who supply parts. So I don't want to say it's none, but it's limited. We're not the home of the big automakers, and yet politicians like Chuck Grassley have voted against raising fuel economy standards every time there's been a vote on it, and he has done nothing to free us from our dependence on oil. And when you talk about inflation, what's driving that? Well, it's oil prices, and what what Putin is doing in Ukraine. And so you not only have this environmental imperative to get away from fossil fuels, there's an economic imperative to get away from fossil fuels. And we can't get a Republican senator from Iowa, Chuck Grassley, to ever vote for those measures to improve fuel economy. So look, that's the key thing people need to do is get engaged as voters and vote for climate. And don't look for perfection. Be practical, make the decision about which candidate is going to do more to advance climate action. So, you know, in some places that may not be, you might not have Sheldon Whitehouse or
Our hero.
Brian Schatz or Tina Smith
You got
as your
one.
U.S.
And
senator.
you.
But
Yeah.
if you have somebody who will at least advance the issue rather than being resistant, that's something that can really help our country embrace this issue.
Some people wonder why I'm, mentioning what Republicans are doing or not doing. And I say, because they're just not at the table at all. And they haven't been, and that's unacceptable. And I would like to point to some that are, we've got a couple of good ones, Liz Cheney, Adam Kissinger, not necessarily on climate, but it's appalling. And what among the hypocrisies is they always say, well, we can't afford to deal with climate change if they even acknowledge it's a problem. It's going to cost jobs. It's going to cost too much. And you just gave a number of what, and those of us who, follow this knew this was coming. It's not going to get, and it's not going to get better. So we need to obviously elect leaders who get it. I think there should be, a rule that you can't run for any office at any level, local, regional, state, or national, until you take a science quiz, and say, I believe in science. That's so silly. It's so basic, but it's so needed apparently.
Betsy, just to give you a scale of magnitude on that $1 trillion of damage that we've suffered as a country since Hurricane Sandy from disasters, the NOAA tracks that decade by decade. And in the 1980s, that number was 66 billion. Adjusted for inflation, it would be about 200 billion today. So we've had a 5-fold increase in disaster damage just since the 1980s. And the scientists tell us that this problem gets worse, gets significantly worse until we take more significant action.
And this is not even the new normal, because this is the normal now. It's only going to get worse, especially if we don't act. And every ton of, CO2 matters, right? And so when people say, well, and don't you love how we kind of went as a culture from what problem to, oh yeah, we're screwed. Like people look at me like
Yep.
I'm naive to think that we could actually save ourselves. It's like, wait, did I miss the memo that we're giving up on our children and grandchildren and everybody else to come?
Right. I'll tell you what, a child who's born today is going to be graduating from high school in 2040. Think about that lifetime. They'll be 58 in the year 2080.
I think about
Right.
that because my daughter's
That's
getting
not
married
that.
and hopes to have
Yes.
children.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's
But
not that far in the future. So we all have people that we care about. My kids range in age from 22 to 28. We all have people we care about who are going to be alive well into the future. And if we want to take care of them, we urgently need to cut our climate pollution by 50% or more by 2030. That is the policy of the Biden administration, which is fantastic that the Biden administration made that commitment. And we need to help do it. And it's not just on the politicians. It really needs to be a whole of society effort. I like to tell people, do things in your personal life to help reduce your carbon footprint, to help cut climate pollution, become more sustainable. And when you do it, tell an elected official or a candidate about it. Speak up with the public about it. This is something all of us need to do together. I'm somebody who believes in talking the talk and walking the walk. So, this year I mowed my yard. I didn't use a drop of gasoline to do that. I got an electric mower. I've got a big yard. By the way, I don't mow at all because we have room for native plants and species in our yard too. But, I was really proud this year. This is the first year I've been able to do it without using a drop of gasoline. And by the way, my electric mower, we have solar panels at our house. Now that doesn't work for everybody, but for people who are in a position who can do it, or if you can buy into community solar, do it. And we have these solutions that work. So let's be Americans and let's just solve the problem. That's what I don't understand, is why we can't unite around that idea. And certainly, Republicans, they need to look at that history and embrace some of those accomplishments that their heroes, like Ronald Reagan, have had.
How about just embrace their children and grandchildren, if nothing else?
Well, that helps too. By the way, there's a former Republican Congressman, Bob Inglis,
Yes, he's been on my
from
show.
South Carolina.
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Anyhow, I heard him speak once, and that was the reason why he started acting on climate change, was because one of his kids talked to him.
Yep.
So, whatever it takes, we're in this together, and we need to act.
Absolutely. And we're going into COP27 with a little more, or President Biden is a little more in his pocket, so to speak, and that's the Inflation Reduction Act, or climate bill, as we like to call it, we advocates. Do you think that will make a difference? Because there's already, there's like expectations building, and then right before, there's a lot of reasons it seems to lower expectations. Coca-Cola's that's gotten a lot of
okay, so I actually had a unique experience of attending virtually COP26 as a representative of the presiding bishop of the Episcopal Church. I'm a member of the Episcopal Church, and I was on the delegation. It was an eye-opening experience. It was great to hear the voices of the global South. And what I like to say is, look, there's no international agreement that's going to be perfect, right? We continue to need to make progress. Progress was made at COP26 in Glasgow. It wasn't everything people wanted, but it was progress. I expect more progress to come out of Egypt. I actually just got off a call with the presiding bishop's delegation for COP27, where I told them, hey, look, Egypt's really important in the history of Judeo-Christian people. So let's work for something really positive to come out of Egypt. I think positive things will continue to happen. I will tell you, it's far from guaranteed that we're going to solve this problem. And when I look at what Vladimir Putin is doing in Ukraine, it's horrific. Can you imagine the carbon pollution associated with that war?
I do, and I shudder, and the loss of human life. And what's the point of, winning a country that's shattered and destroyed? Not to mention everyone there is going to. Anyway, won't go down.
It is horrific.
It's horrific, and so many other words that we would agree on, I'm sure. Just what we don't need right now. The common enemy of the world is the climate crisis, and why don't people realize that? And then to have, our fate in the hands of a narcissistic megalomaniac, and apparently someone has no reverence for human life, is scary as heck, especially with nuclear, weapons at his disposal, as if we don't have enough to worry about. And this is the thing that gets me. If we had everybody working in the same direction across the world, which we should, if people really got the urgency, it's still going to be a big challenge, transitioning from fossil fuels to renewables, like almost epic and maybe not even possible. But to have forces still fighting against it and disguised as something else, it's hard to sleep at night.
It's a real challenge. And Betsy, you described it perfectly there when you said, even if we had everybody in the world united, it would be hard enough.
Yeah.
And the fact that we have people like Putin and the climate change deniers in this country who are doing the bidding, they're misguided, short-sighted bidding for what they think is their personal interest, but it's not, because climate change is going to come back and bite every single person in the rear end. You cannot escape it. I've been bitten badly now in my life with the derecho, right, and the flood, and my district in the flood. I've seen it. It is traumatic. It is heartbreaking. Poor people who lost their lives and lost so much in Hurricane Sandy and Superstorm Sandy. One anecdote I'll give you is I actually had a former constituent who was on my email list, who after the flooding in Cedar Rapids in 2008 had moved to New Jersey. And she writes me an email and says, Senator Hogg, I think I have a problem with natural disasters in my life.
They're following me.
She felt haunted by the fact that her life was devastated twice in 5 years. And my heart just goes out for all the people in Puerto Rico and Florida right now who are dealing
Pakistan,
with Pakistan. The flight in
Cuba,
Pakistan is
Cuba.
atrocious.
It's the list is so long, and
Yes.
yeah, I'm haunted by reading about so many devastating situations during Superstorm Sandy. I think the worst one, it's almost hard to talk about, was a mother who had a child or two babies in her arms, and she was banging on someone's door, and the man wouldn't let her in, and her children floated away down the river. I mean, how do you recover from that? You don't. And I'm wondering, in your area, did the derecho, how do you pronounce that?
Great show.
Derecho, did that change minds, do you think?
Um,
Not
Between
enough?
the floods that we've had and the derecho, I think there's a pretty broadly held consensus that this is something that is serious, that needs to be acted on, but it still hasn't moved up the priority list as far as it needs to.
Right.
Um, People experience things like that, and one of our congressional candidates, in response to a Democrat candidate, in response to the question about climate change at their last debate, was just like, well, after the flood of 2008, how can we not act on this, right?
Yeah, and
And
Hurricane
so,
Harvey, people still are out of their homes, in Houston, how many years later?
yeah,
Remember
but
Harvey?
there was a PBS special this week that highlighted that,
Mhm,
covering climate now, burning questions.
mhm.
And in that show, they followed a family that was displaced by Hurricane Harvey, and they were still living in a motel.
Mm.
These human consequences are heartbreaking. So uh, here's the thing that makes me hopeful, and I encourage audiences to um, find something more you can do. Right? There's always something more you can do to cut climate pollution. If that's not necessarily your thing, or you feel like you've done what you can on that as an individual, because it's hard without systems to support you. There's a role for everybody on disaster relief. There there is literally something for everybody to do in the effort against climate change. And join a group, get involved, learn more, speak
Vote,
up more, do
vote,
more.
vote, vote climate.
Vote climate. Obviously, that's the thing that's top of mind, because we got the elections coming up. But even beyond that, it's this whole of society approach, just to be there and talk about it. Catherine Hayhoe has a nice book out about saving us, where she says, just talk about it. Talk about why you care about it and what you're doing about it, and raise that conversation.
Well, that's what I've been doing for 25 years, is bringing on the experts like yourselves from politics, science, activists, arts, activism, to say what's going on and have these conversations, because mainstream news networks are not doing it enough. They're mentioning climate change, but they don't go deep or wide, and it's not consistent, and the continuity isn't there, and that's what we need. So we can't solve the problems until we know what they are. That's the first step always in recovery, and we need to know what to do. So how the heck we're going to cut our gases in half, get off our gases, as I say, by 2030, when people don't even really understand the problem, let alone what they can do, we're going to fail. We're absolutely going to fail. So that's what Green TV is all about. A little plug there, but we speak the truth. We focus on solutions, and we are just unwavering in our dedication to covering not just climate, but all the shades of green, because it's all connected. Oceans are in horrible shape, connected to climate change. Extinction, of humanity, possibly. It's like, what, you couldn't scream from the rooftops with or without solar panels any louder. And yet still we're finding ourselves, it's still not top of mind. It's still parallel universes. Okay. So I don't have to tell you, I probably don't have to tell our viewers, but I do want to remind people to please subscribe to our YouTube channel, greentv.com. We are trying to get up to 1,000 subscribers, which shouldn't be too difficult, but we're kind of in beta mode. People don't quite know about us yet. So please help us spread the word. You will not get any spam. You'll only get notified when there's interviews like this get posted. And tell everybody you know, because if we don't talk about it and understand it and make it top of mind, there's just no way. And I think that's critical. When people ask me, what can I do, Betsy? I say, put on the green glasses and just look around and see where you can conserve in your life. energy, water, food waste, huge problem. And people are hungry in our own country, probably, in neighboring communities. We just have to have that waste prevention, mindset that some of us are obsessed with. I started Trash Talk Green Minute features on Earth Day 1997. So I hate waste. That was my entry-level drug, as I say. And then I went from garbage to global warming. Oh my gosh, and haven't looked back, for better and worse. So just want to wrap up by thanking you. I do want to hear your story. What was your eco epiphany? What got you on the climate road early on?
It was an issue that I was interested in as a kid. I was interested in ecology as a kid in the 70s and 80s. I actually had a class that discussed global climate change at the University of Iowa in 1986. And I think the thing that really sealed it for me was the summer of 1988 and the drought. And after that, then I pursued education, got a master's degree in it, and I've been working on it ever since. So I started really as a climate activist in the late 80s, early 90s. Tried to stop the University of Minnesota from rebuilding its coal burning heating plant. I was partially successful on that. This is the work of a lifetime, Betsy. I call, in my book, America's Climate Century, I call climate change the defining challenge of the 21st century.
Absolutely.
This is the make or break century. And many people think we're in a make or break decade, which I agree with, that this is the time that we need people to get engaged. And so, like with young people, I talk to them about, how are you going to incorporate climate action in your life? And can you find a job that you're working on it? There's a young person in Cedar Rapids who I just love, who's a solar energy installer. He's also one of the chairs of our local Sunrise movement, right? Yep. So he's both doing it hands-on himself and engaged as an advocate.
That's
and
fabulous.
young people can do that. And that, this is the historical challenge. It is a cause and calling worth dedicating our lives to. And I know I certainly have tried to do my best, and I plan on continuing to work on climate change. I'm retiring from the state senate this year. I plan on continuing to work on climate change, and I hope Americans can come together to take the action that we need, and let's do it.
The alternative is unthinkable. Absolutely, let's do it. And I give young people hope, which they don't expect when they hear a woman is coming to talk to them about the climate crisis, kids in high school, college, and say, think about whatever you're interested in, putting a green twist on it, a twist of lime, if you will. And, whether it's journalism, law, medicine, nutrition, think about how you can incorporate the biggest challenge of our lifetime, and certainly theirs, into it. And it will, I say, you'll have job security for life, because we ain't going to solve this in one generation. And they get excited and they come up and they thank me, because I didn't really see it that way. But absolutely, make your passion your profession. I mean, why not? And we do need to get environmentalists paid a little bit better. Shouldn't be so hard. I shouldn't have to do my program for 25 years on my own time and dime, but I have, because it's considered a niche thing, which is crazy. Yeah, it's a niche that only applies to those who eat, breathe, or drink. That's all. Everybody else, go about your business. And when people say, well, it's a political issue, I don't want to talk about it, or we're not going to bring it up if you speak to this group, make sure, like if it's the Rotary Club, don't talk about politics. I say, it's not a political issue, it's a physics issue, and it got politicized by one party. Let's just face it, okay? And fossil fueled by the dinosaurs. And that is not okay, because it's not a political hot potato, and that they succeeded. The forces that wanted to confuse and to diminish and to deny, we lost a decade or two. And for those of us who have been on it for a couple of decades, watching this happen, it's difficult. I mean, let me just close with this. This is maybe a personal question. How do you cope with the madness?
Well, there are moments, of course, that are very discouraging. I think about the solutions that we have and how effective they are. At some point, it seems to me that it's pretty hard to resist clean energy sources that are cheaper and healthier for us.
You'd think.
And at some point, it's pretty hard to resist the notion that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure when you're, for example, doing land use planning. Let's keep development out of the floodplain in Iowa, for example. So I see signs. I see signs that those solutions are winning out, and that makes me very hopeful. And I'm sticking to it. Sometimes your activism takes a little different forms. Um, but I just feel good. I feel good. I know we have solutions that work. We are in a very difficult situation, but together we can do it. And the power of invitation.
And what are you going to
That's
do when you leave politics? I hope you'll do something with climate change. We need you, and you're still so young. So you have to
well,
retire.
thank you. I appreciate that. We will see what happens. I'll keep you informed. And I do think we can make some real. We've got a United States government right now that is committed to action. We could be doing more, but we all need to do more. So let's support that, and let's bring our country together and lead the world to the climate action we so urgently need. And globally, there's extraordinary things happening.
Yeah.
Some bad, like the Pakistan flooding that you mentioned, but there are solutions around the world that are working as well. People who are restoring mangroves and are developing more renewable energy in places that are energy poor. Some of these. I was reading a book about climate activists in Africa. They're just going full steam ahead into a solar power era, so that they have the energy that their people need, and they can do it with no carbon emissions, or virtually no carbon emissions. That's a very powerful story. It's very attractive. We have the ability to solve this problem and create a more prosperous and healthy future. The question is, do we have the will and the desire to do it as a society? And it's not just government officials that have to do it. It's all of us who have to want it. We have to vote that way. We also have to live that way. We can do it.
Exactly. We got to live it, not lip it. And that goes for all of us. I'm not perfect. I'm not a vegan. I do fly. But I've also done my part, and we encourage everybody to, and get out and vote with the climate and the planet in mind. It's our one and only home. They may be talking about Mars, all those billionaires, but it's hotter there than it is here, even with global warming. So thank you. I'm honored, Senator Hogg, that you've been on my program, different programs over the years. But this is the third time you reminded me. So I knew I wanted to get you on when I saw that you were talking about the 10-year anniversary. I think it's really important to remember, and this is happening today as we speak, and all the horror that unfolded with Superstorm Sandy. People in Florida and beyond, as we've talked about, are just beginning that long road, and it's just nightmares on top of nightmares on top of nightmares. And let's do everything we can to avoid the worst of it, and we don't have a lot of time. So thank you for making that point.
Thank you, Betsy. Thank you for the show, and keep up the good work.
You too. Okay, we'll have you on again, maybe after you retire. We'll see what you're doing, hopefully in the climate world. We need all the help we can get. Thanks again for your time. That does it for this edition of Meet the Solutionaries on Green TV. And we really appreciate you telling everybody you know. Again, only those who eat, breathe, or drink. Everyone else can go about their business, about our program. And please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We promise we're going to start live streaming, and we can expand our content and output exponentially. So please help us do that so we can help you.